Welcome back to the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. Mitch Shreve, along with stars of the show, Ryan Steele, Ben Sperry, and then our special Duke fan guest. We have Tim Peoples with us today. We just got done recapping the Duke North Carolina round 2 here this season. We talked about some of Tim's favorite North Carolina and least favorite North Carolina players. So now we're going to kind of get into different eras of Duke North Carolina and kind of set up this rivalry and why we wanted to highlight this game so much, especially since Steele and I are such huge Tar Heels fans. But we kind of mentioned it in the last break, but I have to start this just by saying that my favorite North Carolina player, and he was with us tonight, is Joe Forte, which actually happens to be Tim's least favorite player. So go ahead, Tim, and just give us some of your favorite Duke teams, Duke players.
Okay. I would have to say if we start with my favorite Duke team, it would have to be the 2009-2010 team. Because to me, that team won a championship and there wasn't any top NBA talents. I know Singler made it, but that team felt special because, you had the Plumlees who most people didn't like. And then you had my boy Nolan Smith. It wasn't your typical Duke team that wins championships. So it was a real special, close-knit team. So that was one of my favorite teams. And one of my favorite Duke players. I have to go with it. I'm sorry. I don't want to be, a homer, but it's JJ Redick. I love me some JJ Redick. I know most people would go with Zion and the new class, but there was some about JJ. And when I was in college, a lot of people gave JJ flack early. They was like, he's soft, he's this. But by his senior year, even some of my North Carolina friends would say, you know what? I kind of mess with JJ. So that was one of my favorite Duke players. So.
And also like it was a lot of like fun from a perspective of watching like elite off-ball movement and like shooting to like watch him play, because Reggie Miller was like that in the 90s in the NBA, like all he's just running around picks, setting his feet and firing. JJ was so good at that, and I really liked watching that and kind of emulating it.
Yeah, the one last thing I'll say about JJ was, even though he didn't have handles, I remember the crossover he hit in the Carolina game. So
I mean, I've said it for years about JJ. I think there should be a documentary, a 30 for 30 on his college career, because no player in college to this day, in my opinion, faced what he faced in opposing gyms. I mean, I've heard interviews with him before where he said, he would change his number multiple times a month because people would get it. He'd be warming up for games and they'd be yelling his sister's phone number at him, his mom's phone number. Like, he said he can't repeat some of the stuff people were saying to him in game, and he would go out there, drop 30 on you, hit dagger threes, and then tell you about it. Like, he was a different, a different white boy for Duke, and I really like that about him. I hated him when we played him, but he was so good, man. He was the man for sure.
They took it when he played Maryland. They took it too personal because they talked about the sickness his sister had. So people
took it way too far.
That was a little bit too far. Yeah.
So okay,
go ahead, Ryan. Oh, you're good. Go ahead.
So that's your favorite player, JJ. Your favorite team was the championship team, and man, did I hate that team. John Shire, the Plumlees.
Yes.
Zubek, I couldn't stand Zubek's big goofy butt. So in that same vein, though, the year before, that's my favorite team, the Hansbrough senior year team with Danny Green and, Ty Lawson, Wayne Ellington, Deion Thompson. I mean, that's a team that, ran through March Madness and didn't have anything but a double-digit win every time out. I mean, that was, to me, the best team I've ever seen Carolina have, and my favorite. Favorite player-wise, it's a little weird. Most people find it weird when I say it. Rashad McCants.
Yeah.
Rashad McCants was my guy. I would say between him and Antoine Jameson was too, but Rashad McCants, for whatever reason, I love that dude from the time he stepped foot on campus his freshman year. So that would be mine. Mitch, what about you, buddy? And Joe Forte, any call on a team?
So So I always liked North Carolina since I was like, I don't know, like 5 or 6. Like when I first found out that's where Michael Jordan went. That's what, it was kind of thing. So, but I really didn't like get in and start following them until like I was around like 12, and that was right around the, Billy Guthridge, Joe Forte era. So that was just like that's where it kind of all hit. And like my aunt actually took us on a trip down to Chapel Hill during that time. So like I was like right there in it, like right in the Joe Forte time. So I think that's kind of why I latched to it, is like I got to that age where I could actually like watch games, understand what was going on. And so from there, but I think he's always just been my favorite player. And, Steele, I showed you my original Joe Forte jersey, which I don't wear anymore because it's too valuable to me. But I think my favorite era of teams it was probably right through college with Ty Hansborough,
Okay.
and Danny Green, and I really liked Ty Lawson and how he was just a 5'11", 6 foot, just stud and not afraid to go in. And just ran the game. And so I'm hoping that like even like an RJ Davis is going to kind of turn into, I would love to see RJ Davis come back next year as a sophomore and kind of like Ty Lawson did, hit the weight room and like get thick and because he's not afraid to go amongst the trees. And so I think that just that era. And then, like I said, I was in college and they won a national championship that year, in there. And I think that was just a fun team to watch. And then, now that, I have my daughter is now saying go Tar Heels. So this era is pretty fun to watch too, because I'm, training my next gen here. So
No, can I just say, like, so growing up and not really feeling like I had one of the two as like my team. Team that I remember seeing and really thinking was cool was Ed Cota, Antoine Jameson, and then Vince Carter from UNC. But then a few years later, when I think we were getting right through high school, when Duke had, was it Battier, J. Will,
Dunleavy, Boozer,
and Boozer,
Carrawell,
all future,
Chris
but like
Duhon.
So they had 5 guys, and Carrawell wasn't even one of them. Duhon was coming off the bench. They were like future NBA players, and a couple of them looked like they're going to be superstar NBA players.
Yep.
I mean, they didn't quite turn out like that, but Boozer was still ended up having a really good career. J. Will may have if he didn't get hurt. Even Dunleavy had a good couple years in the NBA. And of course, we know what Battier had a long career. That was a really cool team because it was like the script got slightly flipped. Because I think a few years prior, it seemed like even though they were equal in college, North Carolina had all the NBA guys.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And Duke just had these guys that are good college players.
Good 4-year players.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It started to seem like it got flipped a little bit when Duke seemed just absolutely loaded with future NBA talent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, running joke in our high school was before 2000, you had to name the amount of Duke players versus the amount of Carolina players in the NBA. And let's just say that Duke list was pretty short. So
even the Dynasty Duke, right? Even the Dynasty Duke team, like Leitner made it. Hurley got hurt or something relatively early in his NBA career, so he never really took off. And then, of course, Grant Hill had a great career until he had his injury.
But you can name Rasheed Wallace. You can go all the way down.
A lot of them.
You had about two or three every year that you knew were going to be. So we talked about eras, and I this is an interesting thing to me. Let's get into some of these eras of this rivalry, because there are stretches, 3 or 4 year stretches, where maybe Duke or Carolina kind of runs the other one. So to me, there's a few great eras where it was just every contest for years was so
actually
close.
Hold up.
All right. Hey, welcome back to the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. I want to apologize. We had some technical difficulties there. And before we ended up having to pause real quick, Steele, you were talking about different eras in North Carolina and Duke rivalry basketball. Go.
Yeah. So, I mean, for a person my age, in my younger 30s, really this rivalry started for me in the mid-90s. So from mid-90s now into 2021, I think there was a few, almost golden eras of this rivalry. Start with like the 97 and 98 seasons. A lot of parity between the two. You had a young Antoine Jameson, Vince Carter, Ed Cota team for Carolina. and you had a Jeff Capel. He was more of a senior leader with Trajan Langdon and some other guys for Duke. Those games, all 4 of those in that 2-year span, were give and go. I mean, back and forth. They split both years. Carolina would get out to a lead. Duke would sprint back and win. It was a great rivalry right there. Then you fast forward, Duke kind of runs the show for a while. They bring in Shane Battier and, Jay Will and all these guys, and they beat up on some lesser talented Carolina teams for a while. But then we fast forward into like 2004, 2005 seasons. Carolina has replenished with May, McCants, and Felton, Jawad Williams. Duke has stayed a power the whole time, and really they're a favorite with J.J. Redick in a team led by Chris Duhon, who's now a senior, and they're excellent. I mean, that was probably one of the best Duke teams, and a guy that, you're going to know it, Tim, Daniel Ewing was a monster. I mean, people won't even know who that is. In college terms, he was phenomenal. I mean, he was a beast. Combo guard, could shoot it, could drive it, could defend. I mean, he was elite as a college player. But the 04 and 05 seasons now, again, you split. Duhon has a game-winning reverse layup in overtime. And then my next era would be because then, Hansbrough comes in. They kind of run Duke 6-2 over that stretch. And then you get in some back and forth once we get like Harrison Barnes and Zeller and Henson. And Duke has the Plumlee brothers who seem to be there forever.
They never left. I think they're still there.
And some of those teams, Austin Rivers and even Seth Curry transferring over. To me, those are the 3 best years. I just say, do you guys want to speak on any of those years, any games that stuck out, best games throughout those eras?
Go ahead, Tim.
Okay. Thank you for that. I almost forgot about Daniel Ewing.
He was a monster, man.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he won ACC Player of the Tournament one year because he had a really good ACC tournament. I could be wrong, but yeah.
He was one of those guys that I felt like, when is he going to graduate? He's here every single year. Why?
He was tough.
Yeah, I think, though, I know you guys are going to like, I did like the Plumlee era because they're one of the few threesome brothers that can all say they won a national championship. So one can't get it over the other. Yeah, I like that because, too, I don't like dominance either way, either Duke's way or Carolina's way. Now, I don't like it when we lose. But I do like the competitiveness where the games are close, where you don't know who's going to win, where, Duke could win or Carolina could win or something. So I think the Plumlee era was one of my more favorite eras because it did go back and forth. And, you guys had some big guys that gave us all we wanted to handle and, vice versa. So it was,
and I think that's part of what I talked about last week. One of the defining features of a rivalry is that both teams have a realistic shot of winning or did win in big moments. And I think what has given Duke and North Carolina staying power is that, and they go through eras like you just said, but for the most part, they're both right there each year and really good and able to beat each other any given game. It is interesting, though, like when you even talk about the brief period of time that wasn't the case, when North Carolina kind of went through a short period of time between the really good teams. And almost Duke and Maryland, I remember briefly when we were in, I think, high school, early 2000s became a big rivalry before they fell, because Maryland was like a national championship level team for a while, and then they fell off again and became big.
That was that in between time where Carolina was bad for.
Who was that?
And then Maryland, Juan Dixon and Lonnie Baxter,
Steve Blake.
Steve Blake.
Yeah, Steve Blake will give you the hand.
Wait. My favorite player from that team was Chris Wilcox.
Oh yeah,
he was an animal.
This is why I wanted to bring that up. Did low key as North Carolina fans, did you become like undercover Maryland fans during the bad years?
Maryland all day. Oh, you have no idea, man. Oh.
Well, can I give y'all some perspective from being around the Duke fans and the campuses?
Yes.
At no point did any Duke fan consider Maryland a rivalry.
Right.
I believe that.
I believe it.
at you know, on TV they tried to hype it up, but if you went back to campuses, they wanted, as a matter of fact, one of the last times we played them, the joke was not our rivals.
Yeah, because Maryland probably wanted so bad for Duke to be their rival, but nah, we're not.
And here's my thought on that, Tim, is the fact that you look at last year's team was the worst North Carolina team since 2001, somewhere. It's definitely the worst in the Roy Williams era, and yet every time they played last year, it was still a game, or at least you know, Duke, who was by far the better team, North Carolina still gave them a run for their money and you know, made it interesting. So it's still a rivalry. Now,
and that's what history does for you, is it allows it to prolong. And interestingly, even on the Maryland and Duke point, you see that in other, you know, contexts too. I think of college football, where Penn State fans a lot of times look at Ohio State as a rival, but they just look at Michigan as a rival, even though Penn State wants them to be their rival.
Right.
Or, you know, and then the other way with Penn State is they don't consider Pitt their rival, even though Pitt fans consider Penn State fans like their biggest rival ever. Penn State fans don't care about them. So it's just like interesting how you see that sometimes.
Because I even watched a documentary, and they tried the 2001, 2002 when Duke and Maryland both won a championship. You can't build a rivalry off 2 years. So if you're only going to go about, you know, 2 years was exciting, but the rest of the time it wasn't, then no, that's not definition. Going back to Ben's definition of what a true rivalry is. So.
Yeah, which was a great definition. If you didn't see that, go back to last week's episode and check out his definition, because that was pretty good. So let's.
But like that brings up the question. Oh, sorry.
Go for it. I want to hear what you.
That brings up the question though, is like who or what was your favorite games? Like what were your favorite games ever? Most memorable games ever between these two teams?
One of you guys can start with this one, because I could go on for days and days.
So most memorable, like I said, the 98 season, because that was my first love, my first Carolina love that I fell in love team with was, you know, we get up huge on Duke. I mean, we're strutting. Vince Carter's getting alley-oops in from half court, and we're about to run away with this. And all of a sudden, Wojo starts being Wojo, and Elton Brand starts hitting shots. And now this game's getting tight. We eventually spaced it out and won. But I think that year was awesome. We did that again, and Duke came back and beat us that time. That was probably my favorite year. Most memorable game, and it hurts me to say it, I still have not gotten over this, the Austin Rivers shot. I mean, that game was, I mean, if you looked at like, you know, win probability, you know, Tyler Zeller tips in. People forget about that. He tips in an air ball three that counts for 3 for Duke. If he just grabs that ball, there's never even a chance for an Austin Rivers you know, game winner. So that one, I mean, my phone was blowing up.
Man down.
I turned it off. So that one, from a pain standpoint, is my most memorable. But really, that Hansbrough 4 years when he got his nose bloodied and we beat, I mean, that was memorable 4 years. We just didn't do that. We didn't go into Duke year after year and win there. And that was cool for me.
I think my most memorable one would have to be, I have a tie for 2. It would have to be the Zion Williams ACC semifinal game. And awesome. It's memorable for off the court.
That was a great game.
I have 2 kids, 11 and 8. And my 11-year-old never watched sports. But for some reason, him and my 8-year-old got on this Zion Williamson roller coaster. And we watched every single game together. And to see that game where we sat down and we was cheering and we was together, it was a touching moment as a father to see that. That was actually my oldest first time he watched Duke win, and my youngest third time he watched. And the second game would have to be the Trey Jones from 2 years ago, because that's just me and that was just a father-son bonding moment where we got to hug each other and we got to cheer and all that. And yeah, those were my 2. The most painful one has to be, without a question, senior night for JJ Redick. Tyler Hansbrough goes in there. We was on Duke campus. We was on Duke campus watching the game, and one of my friends was a Carolina fan. He was trying to be quiet, and I was just telling him, we're going to get the parade out. This is going to be a blowout. We're going to get them. And Tyler Hansbrough, he made that crazy little cheese
Yeah.
that I couldn't stand. So that
fun.
one really hurt me. That one
Yeah.
hurt my pride.
I have to go with an era on this one. More is and I can't even give you the actual stats of who won more games, but so growing up, the funny thing is I was a huge Tar Heels fan, but my brother was actually a big Duke fan. And it got so bad that my mother, bless her, actually banned us from watching the games together because it usually ended poorly. So I had to watch it in one room. My brother had to watch it in another room. But, I'm sure my mom can back this up, though, is that my brother and I were still screaming back and forth through the house at each other, So I just think, and those were like our high school into college, junior high into college. He's 3 years older than I am. So I think just that, right around the McCants and Felton and, JJ Reddicks and Sheldon Williams there, right in that, man, that was just a lot of fun basketball to watch. I can't remember the exact year on it, but that one where Jawad Williams hit that three close to the end of the game. Steele, can you remember what year that is?
That was 04.
04. And
he sent it to overtime, I'm pretty sure. And then in overtime, McCants hit a three with 9 seconds left to tie it. Duke inbounds it. Duhon goes down, reverse layup to win it.
Okay, there it is.
It was
crazy. I just remember when Williams banged that three. Okay?
Oh.
I was upstairs in my parents' room watching it, and I remember going to the top of the stairs and just screaming down the stairs. And I see my brother's head poke up, looking up the stairs at me, jawing back at me. So I think that's what makes it better, is that just that stuff that, my brother and I used to go back and forth on, and it's just a great rivalry, and then you hear people say it's the greatest rivalry in sports. I think it really is. So.
How about, does anybody have a favorite play or a favorite moment from the rivalry? Or favorite plays, plural? Does anybody have any memorable moments they remember? I have two big ones.
All right. Who wants to take this one first? If you're ready, go for it.
Yeah. Okay. I have the dunk that kind of, I've never dunked a basketball on a 10-foot hoop, but it made me want to, was Stackhouse's reverse and one dunk in 95.
Yeah.
That was the coolest thing I had ever seen. And then the other one was Danny Green dunked on Greg Paulus, crotch in his face at Duke.
Yeah,
and
that
Greg
was
Paulus
a good one.
One of those annoying Duke players. And it was just it was awesome. Those are my two memorable ones.
I think one of my memorable ones was 2016 with Grayson Allen. And if you don't remember the road game of that, because Jay Billis, he wore out the saying, this reminds me of 2012 with Austin Rivers, but he kept saying, Emil Jefferson got hurt before the game, so he couldn't play. And they was only playing 6 guys. Then Matt Jones get hurt during the game. So in the second half, they're playing 5 guys only, and they went to a spread offense. And, I know everybody hates Grayson Allen and all the antics and all that, but I love the way they scrapped down and they just stole a game that they shouldn't have won.
Oh, he didn't miss. It was ridiculous.
Him and Brandon Ingram,
that's who it was. I couldn't remember who the other guy was. Somebody else wouldn't miss that game.
Yeah, him and Brandon Ingram, they just played an NBA type offense where Coach K gave them the ball, and whoever had the worst matchup, they just scored. So that to me, that to me was memorable. And then I'm gonna go with the Zion Williamson dunk when he was in the game. So those were two for me. I'm not gonna go with the shoe though, because I don't want to pour salt on that.
I really felt bad for him that game and going down, and I still have to say it. If he's healthy and played those two, North Carolina, I don't think sweeps him during the regular season there. Mine's not a play, but mine's a moment. Well, I guess it came from a play, but the bloody Ty Hansborough when he caught the elbow from Henderson. I loved that. When he, that face he made, and he's staring him down, and
he's getting up like he's ready to fight and everything.
Like Psycho T, that was like Psycho T at his peak right there. So I just love that. I love that moment, in the rivalry. It's pretty cool.
I was gonna say, and I might get the details of this wrong because we were pretty young, but the game where it just kept going into more and more overtimes, and there was like a half court shot, but I think it was Chris Caraway or somebody. I can't remember.
Jeff Capel.
Capel, that's right. It was Jeff Capel, way back in the day, and it just kept on like back and forth, like that as an introduction to what a rivalry game's supposed to feel like.
Yeah,
and kind of like what I remember.
And Duke wasn't ranked during that game.
They were terrible. They were 0-7 at that point in the ACC.
Yeah, and North Carolina was 7-1.
Because Coach K was out with back problems.
That's right. Yeah.
You know what's funny? They show that play like we won the game. You ever notice
that?
Right. They never show the final score, but
when I was growing up, I thought we lost that game. They show that play so much.
Every time you see it, it's that play going off, and you're thinking, "Wow, Duke won that game." No, we lost.
But it's funny how stuff like that happens. And I was going to ask this earlier when you guys were describing some of your favorite moments. Sometimes in a true rivalry, I mean, winning always matters, but it's the moments that you feel during it that matter almost as much. Mm-hmm. And it's a lot of times it's like, why do you remember, or why is that your favorite era? It has to do with like what Mitch is saying. Like, it's going back and forth with my brother as we're growing up.
Yeah. Right.
It's like what Tim was saying, like now introducing my kids to it, my sons to the same rivalry. Right. And so it's kind of interesting. And we've talked, Steele and I know we've talked about this before too. What becomes your favorite era, your favorite player, your favorite team, and why? A lot of it has to do with like what you grew up with and like what you associate that with. And for me, and it's a cross sports comparison, but when I think of like watching the Steelers, I think of my grandparents' house because that's where I watched every game growing up. And I think of like that relationship we had of like rooting for the team together. And that's what I think of and why it's like important to me, even though it doesn't seem like it should matter. So like, it's funny how like, even with this, it's the other stuff around it almost. Like for me, I remember the Jeff Capel half court shot, even though I didn't remember which player it was, because I just remember it being like, oh, this is what's crazy. This is what makes college basketball special. This is what makes like this rivalry special, is that you don't know what's going to happen.
And you're gonna forget the names of the players and the play and all that, but you're not gonna forget the moment you say you spent with your brother or I spent with my kids. You're not gonna forget that. And back to the old cliche, you remember where you were when this happened.
And how it made you feel, right? Like to me, I just remember the excitement of this game's gonna keep going forever, like and then that kind of thing, right?
So bringing up Jeff Capel and talking about sibling rivalry and stuff, a lot of people probably don't know this, but Jeff Capel's younger brother Jason actually played for North Carolina. So if you think that my brother and me's house is bad, living in Northwest Pennsylvania compared to those guys who are which now they're Jason's actually on Jeff's coaching staff at Pitt. And so I just think that's pretty cool. But hey, I think this is a great place to take a break. And then we are going to come back, and it's All-Star. It's coming up on the All-Star NBA. Tim, you want to stick around? I don't want to put pressure on you. You want to stick around, talk some All-Star with us? All right, that's what I'm talking about.
I love the NBA, so let's go.
So we'll be back with some talk about the NBA All-Star. This is the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Hi, this is Mitch Shreve with the Give and Go Basketball Podcast. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter for all the latest updates on all of our postings and content. You can also email us at thegiveandgo3@gmail.com to ask us any questions or give us suggestions on what you'd like to hear about all things basketball. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.